And so there's a lot of very strong overlaps in value sets for the FIRE movement and for the Bitcoin movement. That low time preference and thinking about things from a long-term perspective, being frugal and intentional about the way that you spend, what you spend your money on, and the opportunity cost of spending. And then just this understanding intuitively that the FIRE movement has about how the financial system and the monetary system works, that it's broken, that life continually gets more expensive, and that saving in money directly is not enough. You actually have to invest. And depending on what you're investing in, you're at least standing still and growing purchasing power just from saving more, or you're hopefully getting ahead of the curve a little bit there and being able to have a positive real return that can really pull that retirement date forward.
Welcome to the Leather Lounge, a weekly show recorded live every Tuesday where we explore the latest innovations in the Bitcoin ecosystem. From DeFi and dApps to digital art, we bring you in-depth conversations with developers, artists, and community leaders who are shaping the future. Whether you're here to learn about cutting-edge projects or to deepen your understanding of blockchain basics and decentralization, Leather is your go-to source for all things Bitcoin. Content shared on this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute financial, investment, or legal advice. The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guests and do not reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, or company. We encourage you to conduct your own research and consult with a qualified professional before making any financial decisions. Well, hello and welcome back to the Leather Lounge, where each week we bring you the conversations with the most influential founders, builders, thinkers, and innovators in the Bitcoin ecosystem. I'm your host, Sean Longstreet. Today is a very special milestone. This is our 50th episode and the 1-year anniversary of launching the Leather Lounge. Over the past year, I've had the privilege of learning alongside you as we've explored everything from ordinals and Bitcoin DeFi to energy innovation through Bitcoin mining and the philosophies shaping this space. I've spoken with some of the most accomplished, visionary, and creative people building the future of Bitcoin, including Joe Visani, Troy Cross, Jason Meyer, Bruffstar, Postwook Natasha, Aaron Redwing, Billy Resty, Nick and Brett from Gamma, Tycho from Zest, and Jakob from Hermetica. I could go on, but I'll just say this, that I am deeply grateful for the growing community and the learning journey that we've all been able to share together. So it feels fitting that today's episode is all about financial independence, a core value in the Bitcoin ethos, and the growing role that Bitcoin can play in helping individuals secure their financial future. Our guest is Trey Sellers, Vice President of Enterprise Sales at Unchained, a platform offering collaborative custody and Bitcoin-backed financial services. With a background in finance, consulting, and enterprise sales, Trey brings a rare and grounded perspective on Bitcoin adoption. He's also written about how Bitcoin aligns with the FIRE movement, and that's financial independence, retire early, and why many traditional financial strategies fall short in today's fiat-based economy. So in today's conversation, we're going to explore why Bitcoin is a powerful tool for long-term wealth preservation and practical advice for individuals and institutions looking to secure and grow their financial wealth through Bitcoin. Whether you're deep into your FIRE journey or just beginning to stack your sats, this will be a practical and inspiring conversation. If you enjoy these shows, please do subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, and follow us on X for live episodes every week. Sharing this show and liking it and following is the best and easiest way that you can support what we are building here. All right, let's dive in. Trey, welcome to the show.
John, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that, especially given this milestone that you've got, this year-long journey of creating a podcast. I know there's a lot of work that goes into that, and it sounds like you're having a lot of success.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, it's a ton of work, but it's also a lot of growth. We started, it was just Twitter Spaces. It was audio only. And around the start of the year, we went to video. So, there's so many learning curves that you're overcoming. And one of my favorite things about this space is the concept of iteration. Like, you can just keep trying things. And if something doesn't work,
you can just do things.
You just do things, yes, and you do it again and again and again. Yeah, man, the growth mindset here is just the best, and I I'm super lucky to be interfacing with people like you and all the other innovators of the space. So
Well, it helps to
yeah,
be a Bitcoiner and already be kind of ingrained with a low time preference and, having this like long-term mindset. Because anytime you're building an audience or, putting together a project like a podcast or a newsletter or any of that kind of thing, it takes that consistency. It takes that like longer term view in order to actually have it be successful. So the 10-year overnight success, as they say.
the 10-year overnight success. Yeah. Well, that's actually a great transition. I gave you a short bio, but could you give us your background, how you got into Bitcoin, and then maybe we can start with your blog post, how Bitcoin is fire friendly.
Yeah, sure. Well, I've been a Bitcoiner for quite a while. I first bought some back in 2014. First heard about it a few years before that, but unfortunately was not quite in a position or intellectually curious enough, I guess, to figure out how to buy it. It wasn't all that easy to buy it back
Yeah.
then, so I should have taken a few extra steps. You'd be talking to a person with a slightly different net wealth than what I have now, but
Yeah.
we live and learn. Everybody takes a few touch points, I think, before they actually start to understand what Bitcoin is and why it's valuable and how it can actually add value to their lives and why it's so important of an asset, right? And then once you start to make some headway in that intellectual understanding, something that starts out as maybe unintuitive starts to become hyper intuitive. That's what I found from my journey. I think that's, I talk to Bitcoiners all day, every day, basically, as part of the work that I do at Unchained. And it's a very similar type of adoption story, I think, for everybody. You get a little taste, and then for whatever reason, 3 or 4 touch points down the line, you start to feel a little bit of a pull and like, oh, I got to understand this just a little bit more. This is interesting. And then you're getting bombarded with headlines from the price going up, which is really kind of the key adoption factor, I think, for Bitcoin, has been historically and will be going forward, which is a great thing, right? Like the price shows signal for the adoption curve of Bitcoin. It's very noisy in the short term, but very high signal in the long term. I came from the banking and financial services world. I've worked at Goldman Sachs. I was in Deloitte consulting in the technology practice, but focused on financial services. I was at MetLife for about a year and a half doing internal management consulting and that kind of thing, but still obviously focused on that financial services. And then prior to my role at Unchained, I was at Truist. I was sitting on the capital markets trading floor, doing like risk and P&L work and sitting in between trade flows, working with the traders directly and the heads of those desks and that kind of thing. And so, I've got this kind of deep traditional finance background and capital markets understanding. And then, it was maybe around 2018, 2019 when I was like fully down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, very much understood it, was starting to allocate much more heavily and had that like dollar cost averaging mentality. That's around the time that I came across the FIRE movement as well. And leading into the bull run that eventually happened in 2020 after the halving, I kind of got the sense that like, hey, this is the direction we're going. I understand this. I think the people around me at the bank are going to have some questions on what Bitcoin is and why they should care about it. So who better than me to be in a position to answer those? So I put together a presentation I called Bitcoin for Bankers, and it was meant to answer that question for them and give them an idea of the market structure and how they should think about it and how they can answer questions in an intellectual manner for their clients who I thought would inevitably be asking about it. And sure enough, we had that bull run. There were a lot of questions. I had that presentation ready to go, started making some rounds, developed like an internal newsletter within the bank that people were asking me to join just to get some updates on the headlines and my initial thoughts on what was going on during the time. And then eventually I was asked to join a crypto working group that the bank had stood up with some senior executives trying to just understand the landscape of what was going on out there. This was in the 2021 timeframe. So, you've just got like all this enthusiasm in the market and everybody's talking about Bitcoin. It's flashing on CNBC for the whole, for the whole day, basically. Which has become kind of like the norm, right? Like they've kind of fully adopted Bitcoin now as
Yeah.
something that they regularly talk about, which is pretty cool. And so I joined that as a subject matter expert on the Bitcoin side, and that was a great experience. And then from there, I just started poking around to see if there were any opportunities to work in Bitcoin, and found myself moving into the direction of working at Unchained. And I've been here for 3 years, helped probably thousands of people to hold private keys for the very first time, and do so in a manner that takes succession planning into account. It comes with a level of service that you really just can't get elsewhere, along with helping people to buy and sell and, access some other financial services that we offer. So that's kind of the 30,000 foot view, and the journey that I've been through.
Nice. Yeah, everyone has their own like touch points. I wonder, maybe before we talk specifically about fire, one question I have is, how is the education and onboarding process different right now than it was like previous to last cycle? Is it the same? Do people need the same levels of education, or is it a little bit different? Has it evolved in the last 4 years?
It's pretty much the same. We're going through these different adoption waves. Everybody knows about Bitcoin now. Like, everybody's heard of it. There's obviously a gradient in terms of like how much people actually understand it, and understand the value, and understand the technical aspects of it, and how to custody it. But it's all the same types of questions. And so it's just different people going up that learning curve at different times. And we operate in a very educational type of and consultative type of approach to help people to really understand at the base layer how they can control their wealth directly, and how they can, really maximize the value of the holdings that they have in the Bitcoin world. So I wouldn't say that those conversations have changed in their essence so much, as it's just there's probably a wider berth of people who are now coming to talk to us, right? It's young people, it's very old people, it's men, women, and people with families. It's family offices and investment managers and asset managers that are making much larger allocations. It's businesses, it's enterprises. So everybody knows about Bitcoin. Everybody's interested in it now. It's made its way to the global stage and has become a geopolitical topic of conversation across the world, not just in the US. The administration is adopting it, in terms of strategic Bitcoin reserve. And there's a whole bunch of different states that are considering reserves of their own. And Wall Street is getting there and trying to build products around it. So it's just like a much bigger funnel of people coming in that, whereas it used to be, people who were very much like down the rabbit hole already, right? They already understood Bitcoin, and they're just looking for a really good solution, which we're able to provide as well. So those people still come in the door for sure, but there's a lot more at the top of the funnel than there used to be, I think.
I think it's obvious that to gold bugs, Bitcoin makes sense because it's a scarce asset, right? But I think for a lot of people, they don't really have a proper education on like finances, so they may not really understand like finite value, 21 million. What does that mean? What's the significance? There's so much to Bitcoin, including like the store of value aspect, but then like there's something that we talk a lot on this show about, which is, the layer, Bitcoin, the network. I'm wondering about when you do have those first conversations, when people ask you like who's the CEO of Bitcoin? What's the how do I analyze like the stock? What's their product? What do you say to those people who are really, they don't really have a financial background? They know like, I'm supposed to invest a little bit of money, like I'm supposed to save. What is Bitcoin? What's that first conversation like?
I typically just try to redirect and correct them like right off the bat, which is Bitcoin is money. Money is not something that, as you're saying, or as you're alluding to, people really think about. It's just kind of embedded. It's the water that we're all swimming in, that fish analogy. And so, it's not something that people are really giving a whole lot of thought to. And so, I think framing the discussion around like what Bitcoin solves for people, and helping them understand or surface the problems that Bitcoin addresses, around like trust in institutions, which is pretty obvious to people now that it's kind of breaking down, and that the world is becoming a little bit more fragmented, that money is a very central part of the agreement and the communication mechanism that we have with the people around us, and with governments and corporations and all of that. And when that trust starts to break down, you start to see a lot of volatility in the regular world. And that the monetary system that we have is very much built on something that requires trust. And so when that trust breaks down, the credit that our money is actually built off of starts to get a little wobbly, right? And I think that resonates with a lot of people because they can see it. They don't necessarily know how to assign, a causality to that. They haven't quite made that connection, but they can certainly see the volatility and the fragments that are happening around the world and in the country, and wealth divides and political divides and all of that. And it's just kind of helping them tie the outcome of the way that the monetary system and the financial system is set up to the downstream effects that they're seeing and experiencing in their day-to-day lives. I think really helps to frame the discussion or frame the problem in their mind. And you're not open to solutions to something if you don't know that there's a problem to begin with. And so I think that really helps to kind of move people in a direction of thinking about things a little bit different.
Like you said in the beginning, you have to have an open mind to be able to start grasping some of these concepts.
Or you have to have a problem or a burning platform of some kind, right? Like, to some people that comes in the form of getting debanked or like having some problem with the money that they think they own and that they're looking at in their bank account. And to some people, it's just like, hey, you go to the grocery store and the price of eggs has shot through the roof, or maybe you can't even get any eggs because, they're just in such high demand or whatever, right? And we've seen that type of thing recently. Sometimes it's like, hey, I'm trying to send this wire internationally and it's a total black box and it costs an arm and a leg and I have no idea if it's ever going to arrive and it's super slow and there's no transparency at all, right? And
Yeah.
Bitcoin solves all of those problems. It has this unique ability to communicate value both over time and over space in a way that no other asset can do. And it allows you to store your value in something that doesn't leak, that doesn't like have this kind of residual cost leaking out of it, in the form of a growing supply, whether that's gold, whether that's fiat, obviously, whether that's, stocks, bonds, real estate, all of those things have this like steadily increasing supply that that leaks value from you, and a lot of times has other costs associated with them as well. And Bitcoin doesn't have that, right? It's like airtight. It's a contained system there, as long as you understand how to interact with it directly anyway.
Yeah, I want to get your thoughts on stacking sats, storage options, security and safety. But first, let's dive specifically into your piece on Bitcoin is fire friendly. I know you've already riffed on so many of the value propositions of what Bitcoin is, but take us back to that moment when you wrote that blog post and how that launched you into, your newsletter and this current phase of your career that you're in.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, it was around the time that I was really understanding Bitcoin. Wasn't too long before that I found the FIRE movement and kind of started to subscribe to that methodology of approaching my personal finances. Just for anybody who's kind of new to this terminology, financial independence, retire early, really became popular in maybe 10, 15 years ago. And it's an approach to personal finance that is very intentional, that takes a long-term, low-time preference view, and is actually very straightforward and simple. The principles are, save as much as you possibly can and invest that excess into some asset. Typically, it's low-cost index funds in U.S. markets that will compound in a way that can set you free from your job and pull your retirement date much earlier than you otherwise would if you're not being intentional about it, right? And so there's a lot of very strong overlaps in value sets for the FIRE movement and for the Bitcoin movement. That low time preference and thinking about things from a long-term perspective, being frugal and intentional about the way that you spend, what you spend your money on, and the opportunity cost of spending. And then just this understanding intuitively that the FIRE movement has about how the financial system and the monetary system works, that it's broken, that life continually gets more expensive, and that saving in money directly is not enough. You actually have to invest. And depending on what you're investing in, you're at least standing still and growing purchasing power just from saving more, or you're hopefully getting ahead of the curve a little bit there and being able to have a positive real return that can really pull that retirement date forward. And so this idea of freeing yourself from the chains of a job and, having to deal with that commute and the boss you may not like and all of the like corporate environment that's a little bit draining. Let's all be honest about that. That really appealed to me. And Bitcoin adds this other layer to that freedom, which is that when you actually control it directly, when you hold Bitcoin directly, you own your money sovereignly. So it's like you can have financial freedom in the sense of having more money than you need and having a really good nest egg with which to draw to cover your expenses and be able to focus on the passion projects that you really want to focus on, instead of just going to this soul sucking job that you hate every single day and dealing with the commute and all of that. So that's one aspect of it. But when you add Bitcoin into the mix, you can, one, accelerate that journey because Bitcoin grows faster than any other asset, especially at this point in time in its adoption cycle. But not only that, if you own Bitcoin directly and control it with the private keys, you open up a new level of freedom that's not available in the traditional world, which is that you sovereignly control the money. You have no middleman, no intermediary, no bank, no government that you're relying on to give you access or permission to that money. This works very well. A lot of FIRE people like to travel as well. So this works very well for people who are like going across the globe and want to be able to access their money around their travels. But just generally speaking, it gives you a level of control that you cannot have in the traditional world. And so when you marry these two assets, when you bring Bitcoin into your portfolio allocation as a FIRE practitioner, you're really up-leveling the amount of freedom that you're getting, not only because you're getting wealthy faster, but you're also adding this extra layer of sovereignty that, let's be honest, like most people don't even necessarily consider because there hasn't been another option in the past. So that's like I'm able to take this love of the FIRE methodology and marry it with Bitcoin and really solve a whole new set of problems that the FIRE community really hasn't considered in the past. So I wrote this post that kind of lays all this stuff out. It was back in March of 2023, and that has had some really good reception and led me to launch the FIRE BTC newsletter, which is on Substack there. And that's growing pretty rapidly and is the impetus for a book that will be forthcoming at some point. I've already started on a little bit. We'll see when I can actually get it out the door.
Nice. Oh, that's exciting. We'll have to have you back when it's published for sure.
Absolutely. Would love to.
One thing that I think about with the difference between like a fiat mindset and then the low time preference Bitcoin mindset is that all of a sudden you have this extra incentive to just like stack as hard as you can, right? Like no one has enough Bitcoin. And one thing that I've been thinking about is what's the thought process and framework on spending your sats? And if I'm deciding on a family vacation, it means I'm not going to be stacking as much Bitcoin and therefore I'll have less in my future. But at the same time, on that end of the spectrum, you can't rob yourself of living expenses, of living experiences, right? So I'm curious about your own thoughts on this and maybe how you talk with your clients and friends about this balance of saving versus spending money that could be going toward acquiring more Bitcoin.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. There's a balance to be struck. You never know if today is going to be your last day on the earth, right? And so it would be really a shame to delay all gratification to some time in the future when you hit that mythical FIRE number that you're chasing after, only to actually not reach that because something has happened that has changed your circumstances where you can't actually get there. I think as a young person, like somebody who's in their early 20s or even like late teens or whatever, if you're starting to think about these things, you've got so much time ahead of you that as long as you put the priority on setting up this framework for yourself and being very intentional about what you're spending and what you're saving and how you're saving it, you will just naturally benefit from a compounding exercise that will put you way out in front, and you don't actually have to like be so urgent about saving in those later years because you have such a good foundation. So that's one thing to think about. Some people are much more amenable to the job and the situation that they have versus other people. So that's another consideration. All right. Like this is all personal. If you really hate your job and you just cannot wait to get there and get out of there, and you have no other options for whatever reason, one, I would say your frame of mind is probably a little too narrow, and you should try to explore what else you could be doing that will make the current time frame much more enjoyable for you. But you can make that decision to front load as much as you can within a year or two. Take that chance that you'll outlive a year or two, and then just having a framework in place will allow you to see the progress happen over that period of time and kind of kickstart the journey, such that when you get to a certain point that maybe you've set out, at the beginning, you can start to pull back a little bit and start to enjoy living life a little bit more in the present, and not necessarily worry about 30 years down the line or multi-generational wealth and that kind of thing. You want to make sure that you are really digging into the life that you've got and enjoying the people around you that you care about, your family, your friends, and experiencing all that the world has to offer as well. So it's definitely not one size fits all. There's definitely, different strokes for different folks there, but you should certainly like make sure that you're taking the proper steps to secure that future for yourself while enjoying what time you've got right now.
Yes, it certainly makes me deliberately appreciate the experiences more because I know, more of what the cost is. I think I've heard this said about like, the current Gen Z, that maybe it's more of a fiat mindset, but if you have some money, you just spend it right away. I know maybe in the crypto world, it's like, I'm just going to blow it on a meme coin because what's this dollar going to mean? Like in 10 years, it's going to be nothing. So it's all going to zero anyway. So I'm just going to like have fun or kind of
Moonshot.
waste it.
Yeah.
And then when you're presented with the choice of, I could save this in Bitcoin, the greatest savings technology the world has ever known, or I could spend it on an experience, you're going to make that experience the best it can be, and you're going to be fully present for it.
Yeah, very
So
true.
I think it also improves that kind of mindset.
Yeah, very true. You start to make sure that the dollars or the Bitcoin that you're spending are done in a way that's going to maximize, the value that you're getting out of it, and that you're not wasting money frivolously on stuff that doesn't mean anything or is very short lived in the value that it's giving you, or whatever. It's so easy to like set up these recurring subscription things just because you're trying something out, you forget about it. Every month there's 15 20 30 bucks coming out of your on your credit card or out of your bank account that you might not even notice unless you're taking a very intentional view of your expenses, which the fire folks tend to do, right? Very analytical and very like focused on bringing that number to a good balance, because it's very much within our control as to how we can approach all of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about controlling the Bitcoin, about the best ways of storage. I think there's a whole range of self-sovereignty that Bitcoiners can take advantage of, from holding your own Bitcoin with the private keys. That also comes with a lot of responsibility. And then on the other end, you could keep your coins in a hot wallet or on an exchange completely in someone else's control or as an ETF. Let's talk about that spectrum of holding your coins and what that spectrum looks like for different people at different ages in their careers, or what's that range?
Yeah, it really runs a spectrum of IOU that you can't redeem all the way down to full unilateral control over the Bitcoin. And so there are a few different options in the middle there. An IOU that you can't redeem right now is holding the ETF. And in fact, it's like an IOU for an IOU, and there's no like direct connection to any Bitcoin there. If you are holding some value in an account that has no other option, then perhaps that's a good choice. At least you're going to benefit from the number go up technology that Bitcoin is so famous for. And so there certainly are some people in some circumstances where the ETF makes a lot of sense. And I own a little bit of ETFs and an account that I just have no ability to get that value out at this point in time. And so it allows me to get that exposure and increase my purchasing power in a way that I otherwise wouldn't have the ability to do. So it's great to have that extra option. There are other types of IOUs that are redeemable if the custodian for that Bitcoin or those Bitcoin IOUs will allow you to actually do that redemption. And so in that framework, I'm talking about the exchanges that are out there like Coinbase and Kraken and Gemini and River, which is where I buy, the recurring dollar cost averaging that I do. And there's a number of different sources out there for these Bitcoin IOUs that you can purchase, and then you can actually request to redeem the Bitcoin in the form of actually controlling it yourself by using the private keys that actually control Bitcoin, or by controlling those things directly. When you decide to make that, then the question is, okay, well, how am I going to manage this private key material? Because it is the keys to the kingdom. If you have Bitcoin that's controlled by a private key, that's a single private key, and somebody gets a hold of it, they have access to your Bitcoin. If you lose it or there's some type of fire, you may have lost the Bitcoin, depending on whether or not it's recoverable or you've got backups or redundancy there. And so what we do at Unchained is help people to secure Bitcoin behind multiple keys. There's some functionality built into Bitcoin called multi-sig or multi-signature, which allows for multiple keys to protect the Bitcoin all at the same time, and for you to set a quorum of those keys that are required to unlock and spend the Bitcoin out of the wallet that you're controlling. And so the way that we approach this is 2 of 3 multi-sig, meaning there are 3 total keys that are protecting the Bitcoin all at the same time, and any 2 out of the 3 of those are needed to move the Bitcoin outside of this vault, as we call it, once it goes in. It's just a multi-signature wallet that's controlled by multiple keys at the same time. And what that does is puts our clients who are holding 2 out of the 3 of those keys, typically speaking, in unilateral control over the Bitcoin, but it puts us in a position with our enterprise key as part of their quorum to help them recover in case something happens to one of those 2 keys. Or in the case of succession planning or inheritance planning, we're in a position to help the transfer of that asset in the direction that their estate plan has laid out, whether that's a will or a trust or what have you. You have to take care of not only the title aspect of the transfer of the Bitcoin and the legal aspect of that, also the possession aspect, because we are talking about a bearer asset that you can control directly. So it strikes the right balance of leaving you in sovereign control of the Bitcoin, eliminating any single points of failure, putting a succession plan in place, and having a professional services organization there to guide you along the way as you're setting it up and get your questions answered and help you through any types of issues that you might face during that Bitcoin journey. And then we're able to layer in a number of other financial services that are kind of built on this collaborative custody model. So you can buy and sell Bitcoin directly with us. It goes to and from this cold storage multi-signature vault that you've got set up. So it's a really nice, clean experience where you're buying and selling to and from your own personal Fort Knox here. And then we have different account types for different ownership types that you might have. So if you own Bitcoin in your personal name, you can have a personal account. A lot of our clients have trusts that own Bitcoin directly as part of their estate plan. And so you can set up a trust account and onboard that trust in there and have a vault within that trust account. We have a lot of clients who own Bitcoin in a retirement context. And we have Bitcoin IRAs where you can control the keys directly to that Bitcoin within that collaborative custody model and gain all of the same tax advantages of any other standard IRA that is out there, whether you've got that at Schwab or TD or Fidelity. The same rules apply and tax advantages apply there as well. And then we work with a lot of businesses also who are either holding Bitcoin on their treasury or accepting Bitcoin for payments, have different organizational structures and teams that are protecting Bitcoin. We can facilitate a very flexible arrangement around key management, around delivering these financial services and around like supporting the team environment when you're controlling Bitcoin. And our businesses actually have access to commercial Bitcoin-backed loans as well. It's kind of like the final big financial product that we offer at this point, which is that you can borrow against the value of the Bitcoin in that business treasury, or even an investment LLC or some type of entity structure there to kind of unlock that value and use it for some other business or investment purpose that you might have. So this suite of financial services and a really strong consultative approach to service and helping our clients is really what sets us apart from the rest of the market that are either competing with or just offering a different set of services to Bitcoiners and to people who are just looking to gain the most from securing their Bitcoin in a sovereign way.
I'm curious to get your thoughts now as well with, Gary Gensler era gone behind us. For people who wanted to quote unquote do more with their Bitcoin, maybe they want to use it to back a loan for a car or a house. What options do you see either available now or, shortly down the road?
Yeah, I think we're going to continue to see new options come to market. We're already starting to see some different things come to light. We don't offer personal loans or consumer loans, but it's definitely something that I think is going to be coming down the pipe in the market, generally speaking. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more banks get involved in Bitcoin and in collateralized loans like what we offer on the commercial side. And, they're in the very fortunate position where they can print their own money to fund these loans. So that's going to put some downward pressure, I think, on interest rates that are being charged for the financial product that is a Bitcoin-backed loan, which are fairly high relative to, some other loans that are available in the traditional world. As the market grows, as more market participants come to play, as more people understand Bitcoin and are holding larger amounts of Bitcoin for themselves, as the value grows, as more eyeballs come to play, as more adoption happens at the federal level and governments around the world, you're going to start seeing more and more financial innovation around Bitcoin-backed lending and the credit side of this market, and this synergistic melding of Bitcoin and how it operates within the constructs of the traditional financial world. I think we're going to continue to see these things merge so that people can get the types of products and services that they need to incorporate Bitcoin into their personal financial lives and into their businesses.
Looked into some of the loans, and I see like the interest rates, like you said, they're not competitive at all. Like anywhere between like 11 and 14%, which is just, that's not really that reasonable. I mean, maybe in a pinch if you need something short term, but if you're looking at, I want to take a loan and pay it off over the next 5 years.
Well, let me try to reframe it for you a little bit.
Yeah.
So first off, like I've got a HELOC on my house. The mortgage market, the real estate lending market is very, very well understood, very well ingrained, has government subsidies. Like there's all kinds of things that help banks and other lenders to give them an incentive for taking a lower interest rate for a loan that is backed by real estate, right? My HELOC is still at like 8% right now. And if you compare that to Bitcoin, which is still fairly new to most people, Wall Street still doesn't understand it. Most people don't understand it or own it. That spread between 8% and 12, 13, 14% is actually not that wide. I mean, you can go to hard money lenders and sometimes they'll charge you 20% or whatever. So if you like keep it in that context, I think that can help to like put it in the proper framing there. And then the other thing that I'll say is it's interesting to think about like the people who would be lending against Bitcoin as collateral. They kind of have to be the right people, at least at this point in time. You need to have enough of an understanding of Bitcoin and how it works that you understand why it's a good collateral asset for lending against. In a lot of ways, you need to not have enough of an understanding of Bitcoin to think, well, why am I going to take 14% on my money when I could just buy Bitcoin directly and get 60% plus ARR or whatever it is, right? And so there's like this sweet spot of people who understand Bitcoin enough to see the power of lending against it, but don't understand it well enough to think, well, there's so much of an opportunity cost for me to not just buy Bitcoin directly. Why don't I just do that?
I know there's also the concept of, for people who do know about Bitcoin and are familiar with the 4-year cycle, they might be thinking like, okay, it's 2023, late 2023. I know we're low right now and I know where this is going. So maybe putting up Bitcoin for a loan to buy more Bitcoin with that awareness of what happens in the cycle might be more appealing, which takes some more education. I want to hear your thoughts about the 4-year cycle, the halving cycle. Do you think that at some point it'll break? Do you think that it will continue for decades? Do you think that maybe the 4-year cycle is behind us? And what are your thoughts on where we are right now?
I'm not convinced that the cyclical nature of Bitcoin adoption is behind us. I think that it just so happened to like the halving and that, geometric supply reduction that we've been experiencing over every 4 years. It kind of aligns with like the political cycle and the credit cycle and like general economic cycle anyway. And so it's really hard to actually extrapolate what is very like focused on Bitcoin and the cyclical nature that it has versus the actual macroeconomic cycle that is playing out. I think you can certainly make a case that is much more bespoke to Bitcoin earlier in its adoption cycle because very few people knew about it, and the effect of the halvings in terms of like how much new supply is coming on to the market was just so much bigger, right? Nowadays, though, it still is aligned kind of with these credit cycles and what's going on with the political cycle in the US, which controls the dominant monetary system of the world. But the halving itself has, I think, lesser of an effect because there's just so little new Bitcoin that's coming online every year, every halving cycle. I think that we're seeing Bitcoin transition much more into this geopolitical global asset that competes with these large other store value assets like gold and bonds and stocks, and is much more tied to that political and global economic cycle than it is to the inherent properties of Bitcoin and the way that it works. It just so happens to line up that the halving cycle goes, quite nicely with these other cycles that we're seeing. So it makes it like it muddies the waters a little bit as to like putting a causal mechanism between the cyclical nature of adoption that we're seeing in the Bitcoin world and what that does to price. So there's going to continue to be volatility. There's going to continue to be these waves of adoption, people getting interested in it. I think a lot of the volatility that we see with Bitcoin is just a natural part of obviously having a fixed supply, but that meeting up against a very fluid and dynamic understanding that has to happen across different waves of people, right? I was talking about these conversations that I'm having with people are pretty much the same as what they always have been. It's just new and different, diverse groups of people that are becoming aware of Bitcoin and starting to allocate. As the understanding for Bitcoin oscillates, it creates a lot of the volatility that we see in the Bitcoin price, but it always kind of ratchets up because most people, or at least a good portion of the people who do a serious dive into Bitcoin, they start to understand it to a level that prevents them from wanting to sell it. It's exactly like what you were saying. It's like, I don't ever want to sell this Bitcoin. I was just talking to a client before we hopped on here, who's like, I don't ever want to sell my Bitcoin. Like I'm doing everything that I can to make sure that I hold on to it for as long as humanly possible. So like that raises the floor as more and more people start to adopt that type of mindset.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really instills the savings technology. Do you think Bitcoin is more, maybe this is a loaded question, is Bitcoin savings technology or is it peer-to-peer cash? Or is it both depending on who you are?
I think it is both. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think of it and communicate it as savings technology when I'm talking about like what the value proposition is. The beautiful thing about Bitcoin, I think about like the fiat system relative to Bitcoin, relative to gold. Gold solved a very important problem around making sure that you can store value across time. And it ran into some limitations when the global system started to be much more interconnected and value needed to be transferred over distances and in much higher velocity, right? And so the fiat world stepped in where gold could not actually address those concerns. And it's really acted as a bridge from old sound money to new sound money, which is Bitcoin, and a much needed bridge, right? Like we would not have wanted to halt the progress that we were making as civilization, as society, because of the limitations of the monetary system not being able to keep up. So gold solved the problem of transferring value over time. Fiat solved the problem of transferring value over space. And Bitcoin does both better than the other two. And so you get to a point where you have this pristine store of value asset is savings technology that can also be used to transfer value over space in the form of digital cash. And when I think about like the definition of cash, it's not necessarily that you're paying for coffees or these like small dollar things. It's that there's no credit layer that is built on top of that. It's a final settlement mechanism. And so, you can think of gold as cash, but just cash for an analog world. And you could think of fiat, like actual dollar bills, as cash, right? That you can transfer. And most of the time we are using actually a credit layer there, which is part of the fragility of the system. But Bitcoin solves all of those problems with its inherent nature and can be used to secure value over time and over space in a much more efficient way and without having to trust all these intermediaries in place. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to have credit systems that are built on top of Bitcoin to make it more efficient for certain types of transactions. It just gives a much better foundation to the financial system if we're able to adopt it and put it into that base layer.
So right now, the global unit of account is the US dollar. When do you think that will transition to Bitcoin being the unit of account?
I think we're already starting, but it's very, very early.
Yeah.
People, when we hear people talk about the opportunity costs of holding Bitcoin, they're already starting to think about Bitcoin as a unit of account. In a lot of ways, I think that unit of account precedes medium of exchange, just because people need to understand why they want to hold on to Bitcoin for a long period of time. And that is kind of the flip side of this opportunity cost that we're referring to. And if they are wanting to accept and hold Bitcoin because they're denominating their wealth in it, whether explicitly or implicitly, then they're going to want or demand that other people send them that Bitcoin in exchange for goods and services. And so it's almost like a pull mechanism from unit of account to medium of exchange, as opposed to the flip side, which I think we typically talk about it as like, oh, we've got this like straight line from store of value to medium of exchange, and then finally people start denominating. I don't think that's the case. I think it's a little bit more fluid.
I know we're approaching the end of the hour, so let me broaden the scope here and ask about maybe some of your other interests, specifically how getting into Bitcoin, the ethos of Bitcoin and Bitcoin principles have rippled out to other areas of your life.
I think it's similar to the stories that a lot of people will tell about, how it kind of bleeds into health and making sure that you are staying in good shape, limiting the amount of, quote unquote, fiat food that you're intaking. I kind of go on these cycles of that. It's kind of hard to break, right? Because we're surrounded by the fiat food. It's so funny seeing like Steak and Shake on X talking about how they're introducing tallow for their fries and phasing out seed oils and all of that stuff. I think that's an awesome development and would love to see other businesses kind of taking that type of an approach. I can't help but think that Bitcoin has had some influence on that, whether directly or indirectly in terms of the decision for that business. And I wonder if, somebody on their board or at the top there is a closet Bitcoiner. Maybe we'll find out at some point in the future. But really, it's the instantiation of these low time preference type views that really permeate the way that I approach my personal finances and the FIRE movement that I adhere to and the way that I am like tracking my expenses and doing all of that. All of that stuff like has a ripple effect there. And so that's really the essence of how it's affected me.
Yep. That and don't trust, verify. I think that is just a short maxim that is so sticky. All of a sudden you think, don't trust, verify. I have to go double check that. I'm going to check my sources.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I've always been as conscious as I think I can be about making sure I'm not like just spreading some kind of baseless headline, because there's a lot of that on X too. Although sometimes I make the mistake. But yeah, you absolutely should go through and check like the actual sources of the information that you're getting. I've been spending a lot of time in the AI world as well, and ChatGPT and all of that. And I think it's going to continue to get harder and harder to parse out what's true and what's hallucinated, right? Using the terminology of the AI world there, as more and more information is kind of like fed through these types of machines, which is going to unlock an amazing amount of productivity, and new use cases and that kind of thing. But we also just have to make sure that we don't lose that truth value that really should underpin the way that we think.
Yeah. All right. You hear that? AI computers, don't trust, verify.
Yes,
exactly. Show us your work. Nice. Well, I know we're at the top of the hour now, so let's make sure we are sending everyone to all of your socials and just give you a chance to plug everything you're doing with Unchained as well.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks, Sean. I really enjoyed the conversation. You can find me on X at @TS_HODL, HODL. All of that will kind of link to the other things that I'm doing, but go check out the newsletter, firebtc.substack.com. I'm writing almost every week with some new takes on helping Bitcoiners to understand the FIRE methodology and kind of implement that for themselves in their personal financial lives, and then helping the FIRE community to understand why they should include Bitcoin into their portfolio and into the way that they approach their plan. I'll be hosting a panel at Bitcoin 2025. You can use the code FIREBTC for 10% off if you're still looking to buy tickets to that. So I'll be out in Vegas. Feel free to flag me down if you see me. Would love to meet new people as always. And then go check out Unchained. If you own Bitcoin and you haven't taken it off that exchange, or you've got like a single hardware wallet that's protecting your Bitcoin in the desk drawer, and it's a substantial amount of Bitcoin, you should certainly consider using this collaborative custody model to make sure that you are never in a position where you can just make one mistake and lose it, and have this succession plan in place so that your family can actually benefit from this, supreme store of value asset that you've been working so hard to save. So go to unchained.com. We do complimentary consultations. You can talk to a member of our team, might even be me, and we'll help you get set up in the proper fashion and meet you where you are in that conversation.
Awesome, Trey. Well, I'm so glad that the 50th episode 1 year anniversary could be talking about this important Bitcoin ethos of financial independence, because I know the Bitcoin is hope, and it's an unlock for people to think about, to put that don't trust, verify lens on kind of every part of their lives. So yeah, I love Bitcoin. I love preaching to the choir about everyone, including guests like you. So thanks again for joining us.
Thanks so much, Sean. Really enjoyed it. Hope we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, we'll have to get you back when that book is published.
Perfect. Would love to.
Cool. All right. Thanks again, Trey. And thanks for everyone for listening in. We are at our new day every Thursday now at 11 a.m. Eastern. Next week, we're going to have a very special leather-focused lounge with our general manager, Mark Hendrickson, because there's a lot of exciting things, wink, wink, happening with leather right now. So do mark your calendars for a week from today. And then we've got a lot of other great guests lining up. We know that the Bitcoin conference is coming up later this month. So stay tuned, subscribe everywhere you listen to podcasts. Leave us a review if you'd be so kind, so that more people can find us. And we'll see you next week for the next Leather Lounge. Thanks again. Thanks again for joining us in the Leather Lounge. We record each episode live, and if you'd like to listen in or join us on stage, make sure to give us a follow on X at LeatherBTC. Leather is your gateway to everything Bitcoin, from DeFi to stacks, ordinals, runes, stamps, NFTs, and more. You can find loads of helpful crypto content on our YouTube channel, and visit our blog and learn center at leather.io.